love those who hate you and you hate those who love you. You made it very clear today that the commanders and their men, they mean nothing to you. I see that you would be pleased if Absalom were alive today and all of us were dead. You feel the conflict? Can you feel the multifaceted aspects of the conflict? You know, sometimes when we turn on a news feed, or again, we see a social media feed, we try to see it as a black and white issue. There's a good and a bad, a right or wrong, and we feel like we know which one is right and which one's wrong, which one's good, which one's bad. I would cause us to pause and recognize that when it comes to conflict far from us, it's often way more complex than we would make it. And any news source or any social feed will only give us a perspective, but likely not represent the fullness of whatever the issue is. And so I would encourage us to think through this lens before we react, when we listen, before we judge, when we seek to understand, before we add to the division, when we seek out God's wisdom. Because conflict far from us is not always clear to us. Here's the second principle I think is really important for us to know, is simply this. Conflict far from us must be trusted to a God who loves each of us. And just kind of this understanding that God is a God who loves everyone, and so this conflict that's far from us has to be trusted to this sovereign God who loves each and every one of us. And so back to David. You think about the predicament that he's in. Not only did his men ensure the victory, not only did he mourn the loss of his son, he's got tension with the commander of his army. He's a lot to navigate. You kind of think about how this plays out with the entire nation. Again, half the people had followed his son Absalom. And so there's this incredible political divide going on in the nation. Feels somewhat familiar, right? And so there's this political divide, and he's got a choice. What's he going to do? He can punish the people for rebelling against him. He could somehow banish them from the kingdom. He could maybe take the lives of some people who had turned against him. He could have taken revenge. Instead, David chooses to engage. And what's fascinating about David is what he chooses to do in this moment is not just win a political battle. Instead, he chooses to try to win the hearts of the people. You see it in verse 14 of 2 Samuel chapter 19. Help me out with the